Hi BookTube, it's Amy here, and I'm here to talk about Honoré de Balzac's 1838 novel titled A Daughter of Eve. And this is the first work by Balzac in this set that I've come across that I have been uninterested in and disappointed by. Frankly, it was a little bit boring, it was very slow moving, and Balzac falls into one of his somewhat characteristic traps of spending a lot of time in descriptions of rooms, and I get that rooms are very important in Balzac. He often tells us things about the characters in his novels and short stories by describing their setting and the objects around them. But in this case, I found the continuous discussion of these rooms, the continuous description of these rooms, uninteresting, simply because all the rooms were fairly opulent. And I think the only room that really added anything to the story was the room of the banker, the house of the banker who is very wealthy and is using his home to express his wealth. But on to the details of this book. So I think that I possibly may have read the Ellen Marriage translation. I was able to rule out online the Catherine Wormley translation from 1895. This is not it. As I've mentioned before, unfortunately, my 25 volume set of Balzac does not list the translator, and so I pretty much have to guess or search as I can, and it appears to be a collection of different translators. So sometimes we have one translator, sometimes we have another. I was able to find online the text of the Catherine Wormley translation, and that is not this text. I was not able to find the Ellen Marriage translation available online anywhere. So I technically wasn't able to confirm, but I wasn't able to rule it out either. And those are the only two translators of this work from this time period that I was able to pull up. So it's quite possible I did read the Ellen Marriage translation here. So as I said, this is the 1838 novel by Balzac. It is the story of two sisters, two Maries, Marie Eugenie and Marie Angelique. And Angelique is the older of the two sisters. They were raised in a very strict, religious, confined home. Their mother took complete control over every moment of their life, every interaction they had with anyone. They went to only a couple of balls a year growing up. They had, the strictest tutelage, the strictest social interactions, to the point where their mother didn't even allow them to interact with their brothers. Balzac describes them as not knowing what it was like to have a brother, despite having two brothers, but the parents had sort of separated within their own home. So the mother had her compartment where she lived with the daughters. The father had his compartment where he lived with the sons. And because the father had been given free rein with the sons, the mother didn't feel that they were well-bred or well-raised enough for them to be in contact with her perfect daughters, the daughters that she raised in pure innocence. And they live such a repressed childhood and such a repressed upbringing that their only private moments are when they're in bed at night and they can whisper to each other, or when their mother leaves the room occasionally. And their only thought is of freedom. And of course, to them, freedom is only achieved through marriage. And so they are eager to marriage, they're eager to marry, and they actually say to their father, who is sort of dismayed at how restricted their upbringing has been. They say to their father that they are perfectly ready to accept the first man who proposes. And of course, they are going to have large dowries. They are in the French upper class, and so a good, wealthy marriage is going to be no problem for them. And so the eldest, Angelique, Marie Angelique, marries first, and she marries a count. She goes off and she becomes, let me just get this name correctly, the Countess de Vandenesse. She marries the Count de Vandenesse and is quite happy for about 6 years. And it gets a little strange though. This is one of the reasons I didn't like this story. So her husband, the Count, after having many affairs and sort of living the life for several years, decides that he's going to marry, and he is looking exactly for someone like Marie Angelique. He wants someone who has been raised Catholic, who has been raised fairly innocent, and is ready to take his direction. And so he takes this paternalistic approach to their relationship, educating her not only in the arts but also in the ways of society. And so she goes from this sort of straight-laced, dresses up to the collar, good Catholic woman to this belle of the society. Meanwhile, her sister Eugenie ends up marrying du Tillet, who is a banker, and he is extremely wealthy. He has sort of this opulent house. He dresses his wife in an opulent fashion, but he doesn't really care for his wife at all. He doesn't care for his children at all. He only cares about appearances. And so his wife really is unable to access any money of her own. She is very restricted. He controls her each and every social interaction. And both these women, both the sisters, after about 6 years of marriage, come to feel once again that they are trapped. And Madame Vandenesse, the Countess, really has no reason to be trapped. Her husband gives her free rein to quite a degree. She's going to the opera, she's socializing, she's making appearances, she has fine carriages to ride around in. And then sort of the catalyst of this novel is this literary man and sort of political influencer, Raoul. And Raoul shows up at some society event. Marie Angelique, the Countess, catches sight of him and falls immediately in love. And I have a bone to pick with Balzac here, because Balzac spends no less than 6 pages of this novel describing in great detail Raoul, which is quite a long period, considering the novel is slightly less than 200 pages long. And I wanted to read a bit to you here. Page 317 we're looking for. And so yeah, he's spending this long 6 pages just describing Raoul. Raoul's eyes are Napoleonic, blue and soul-piercing. His nose is sensitive and finely chiseled. His mouth charming and adorned with teeth, white enough to excite a woman's envy. There is life and fire in the head, genius on the brow. Raoul belongs to the small number of men who would not pass unnoticed in the street, and who in a drawing room at once form a center of light, drawing all eyes. And he goes on and on. In a word, this awe-inspiring Raoul is a caricature. He moves in a jerky way as though propelled by some faulty machinery. And when walking the boulevards of Paris, he offends all sense of order by impetuous zigzags and unexpected halts. And then we move on, where Raoul Nathan carries into his intellectual life the irregularity which he has made his badge, nor is the device misleading. Like poor girls who go out as maids of all work in humble homes, he can turn his hand to anything. He is a Byron, badly groomed and badly put together, with legs like a heron's, congested knees, an exaggerated small waist, a hand with muscles of whipcord, the grip of a crab's claw, and lean, nervous fingers. And so Balzac goes on for literally 6 pages just about Raoul Nathan, this artist who gets himself into trouble by taking out a large loan to begin a new paper. He wants to publish this paper. He is fairly well known as a writer, as a political commentator, as a playwright. And the Countess is absolutely taken with this horrid man, this man who Balzac describes literally as a caricature. The idea here is that the Countess, Marie Angelique, is so naive of the ways of the world and, I don't know, so starved for anything different from her very controlled, comfortable existence that her husband has created for her, that she is sort of primed and ready to fall in love with this man of literature. The problem, of course, is that Raoul has really no intention of anything other than an affair. He is told that, socially, for him, it's a conquest. It gives him a reputation. But, part of the problem is he's also been living with a second-rate actress, Florine, for the past decade. And he's been supporting Florine. In some ways, he's made Florine's career because she is second-rate, and Balzac really describes her in a less than favorable light. And so we have the typical story of this upper-class affair. The Countess, who fancies herself in love with this artist who is already engaged in an affair with an actress. A typical story that appears in many of Balzac's novels in one form or another, and in many French writers. What rubbed me the wrong way here is the way that Balzac concludes it. So eventually, Marie Angelique's sister, Marie Eugénie, has come to the conclusion that her sister is in trouble. And because her sister is in trouble, she must go to Angelique's husband and tell all and ask him to save her from this disastrous affair and this disastrous fall that she is about to have. And her husband, the Count, quite willingly interferes, gently shows her her wrongs, and has no intention of being upset or angry. Instead, he treats his wife in a very paternalistic way. And Marie Angelique sort of goes, "Oh my goodness, thank God you warned me in time. I see who Raoul is. I am so glad I did not engage in the horrible affair with him that I had started to embark on. I am so glad you saved me from debtor's prison because I borrowed 40,000 francs to give to him. And I am so glad that I was not ruined in the face of society." And that is how this novel ends. And I was not too thrilled with it. This paternalistic relationship between her and her husband, not pleasant to read about. These long descriptive passages about the rooms and about Raoul. Entertaining in some ways, but once again, I was like, Balzac, get to the point. This is the first Balzac I've read where I was sort of saying, come on, Balzac, get to the point of this story. It was just very, very slow moving, and it lacked some of the more dramatic scenes that I've come to expect from Balzac. So that is A Daughter of Eve. And as well, Balzac went a little overboard with the allusions to the creation story to Adam and Eve. Several times, she's described as like innocent as in the Garden of Eden, and Raoul is described in, explicit terms as a snake who is tempting her with an apple. So that is that. I will begin to read next Letters of Two Brides, which is the final work in this volume, and that will bring me to the end of volume 1 of my collection of Balzac. And I'm not promising anything, but I'm thinking I should be back in about 2 weeks' time with the final work in this collection, Letters of Two Brides.